And people call me all the time. Hey, I need to tune my this. I need to tune that. And normally it's a truck. They call it, hey, I got an F-150 or I got a GMC Sierra or I got a Silverado and I need to pick up better gas mileage. And the first thing I say is like, well, how do you drive the truck or how do you drive the vehicle? Because that comes into play. Not too many people realize that if you walk in a parking lot at Walmart and you look at all the trucks and the front of the trucks, they all pretty much look the same, don't they? There's a reason for that. To package the engine inside and to be able to tow capacity, they have to have a certain amount of frontal fascia area, which means that it's a brick when you're driving over 62 to 65 mile an hour. So you'll find that your mile per gallon will increase if you drive less than 62 to 65 mile an hour because of that wind resistance is not completely destroying it. By the way, if you hear noise, there are cars on the dyno today. So if you do hear that, there are cars being tuned on the dyno. So, but on the truck, back to the trucks, when you're driving at 62 to 65, and we tested this many years ago. We actually tested it and gasoline to see which would work for us the best. And by the way, the 93 octane actually gave us better gas mileage. I know the vehicles will run on 87, but with the timing being retarded, we had less torque. So with the timing being there, we actually made more power. It was more expensive, so there's a slight trade-off. So we figured out the best mile an hour and the best octane to run. So if you want to run 87 and you want to get your best mileage, stay below 62 to 65 mile an hour. Don't run 82 mile an hour if you're trying to get your best gas mileage. If you raise the truck, if you raise it more than 2 to 3 inches, you're putting it higher in the air. When you raise the truck into the air, 9 times out of 10, you're putting bigger tires. When you put the bigger tires on there, your parasitic loss comes in again. You're pushing air against that. So if the trucks are completely stock and you want to pick a little better gas mileage, try the actually speed change. Try, but anything less than 55, it's going to get worse normally. Anything faster than 70 is going to get worse. So you got a range there that you can try it. I've done this many times. I've had customers come back and say, you were right on. It works great. But I can't do that. I got to go 75 mile on the highway. Again, most of the highways now, if you're not doing 70 to 75, you're going to get run over. So if you're towing, though, kinds of play. Normally, you're not doing more than 69 to 72 mile an hour. Normally in that area, at least I have found, I keep it at that point for my best gas mileage. And that comes with your cars as well. Cars are a lot more efficient. They'll actually get efficiency between 70 and 75, 65 to 75, I should say. So it's a little better because of the aerodynamics of the vehicle at that. Now, tuning tricks. We call them strategies. So let's go back and visit the old days. Let's go back way back in the 60s and 70s when we had, we didn't have EFI. We had carburetors and we had, mechanical advanced distributors. Well, on the side of those mechanical advanced distributors, there was a little vacuum pod. And if you guys remember this, there's a little vacuum pod on the side. It was a vacuum advanced pod. And what did that do? Well, there was a vacuum line that came off the carburetor and went to that vacuum pod. So when you plane down on the throttle, in other words, you're like very little throttle, which means you have your best vacuum. That vacuum advance is actually pulling against that little module and moving your advance curve. So let's say that your mechanical advance was 36 degrees. We'll talk about a normal small block Chevrolet or even a small block Ford. So 34 to 36 degrees. If you set your distributor up for that and you were doing 3,000 RPM, that's the max timing you would normally get. However, the vacuum advance module sees vacuum, so it moves the little plate, and that plate advances the timing upwards another 10 to 12 degrees. On the Ford, it was easy to adjust. You had an Allen that you could put inside, and you could adjust that pod. And the best way to adjust it was to drive it and advance it to the point you felt a surge, just a slight surge at that cruise RPM you wanted to drive at or mile per hour. And you would adjust it. You felt that and then turn it back a half a turn to get rid of the surge. Same way today in the fuel injection world. There's nothing different than the same way. The mechanics are the same. How we do it is different. We would do it in the table where our load or our KPA, where we're at, we would adjust the timing for that. So that's one of the strategies we're doing. Give an example. So in the old days, we were driving along there. I could get between 48 to 50 degrees of advance from the vacuum advanced distributor to get my mileage up another 2 to 3 miles per gallon. That was one way to do it. I could take the distributor. If I wasn't racing the car, I could actually turn it up. Now, Chevrolets were a little different because like your ATI distributors and the early ones did not have an adjustable vacuum advance. So you could buy the Mr. Gasket. You can still buy the Mr. Gasket advance module or the vacuum pod I think I'll remember the part number offhand, but you can Google it. Summit still has them, Jegs, and I know Mr. Gasket still makes it. So there is a vacuum advanced module, and you just change it out, and then you can take an Allen to adjust it. Many people didn't know that years ago when I used to recurve distributors on a daily basis. I had them in stock, and I would install them as part of the package deal so that people could adjust it for their best mileage. Or if you had a big cam car and you were driving it, your vacuum advance would go too far and you get that surge driving down the road. So what would you do? People would just block off the vacuum advance module. Well, there goes your gas mileage, right? And then today with $5 and $6, for a gallon of fuel, we want our best. So, pick up 2 to 3 miles of the gallon, and that can drop your monthly pay or your monthly gas output. Normally, 50, $60, which, hey, that's good to go out to dinner at Longhorn one night. Okay. So in the carbureted world, like I said, we had to adjust that. In the fuel injection world, it's a whole lot easier. We can actually log what load we're at or what KPA we're at, look at the advance we're at, and take that in our table and move that table up 2 to 3 degrees until we get that surge, and then back it off 2 degrees or 3 degrees to get where we want for our best gas mileage. It sounds really simple. It really is. And most tuners out there that know how to do this are very adept with doing it. Some of them don't know this. I've taught classes for years where I've actually taught people how to do this. And they're suddenly like, wow, I never knew I could do this. Give an example. I was in Australia. We were talking about this in class, and the guys were like, oh, mate, I get my gas mileage is crappy, man. I'm like, all right, here's what you do. So I did it and showed the guy what to do. And he called, hey, mate, I picked up 2 to 3 miles a gallon, mate. So, hey, right there off the bat, these guys are happy. Your customer will be happy. You'll be happy if you can adjust it, which brings up my pitch. So with HP Tuners, our device read and write the vehicle. You can data log it, as well as you can actually change these things. So you can change that advanced timing. If you are driving a newer Ford vehicle, an 11 up, Coyote, EcoBoost, or whatever, you're going to find that you're going to have anywhere from 16 to 27 mapped points, which means that there's a lot of tables that you would have to modify. It's really simple. If you data log it, you'll actually see the map point that you're cruising in, which is normally designated by your economy map point tables. Those tables at that point, you would just modify your cruise timing on those tables alone, and it doesn't affect your wide open throttle. So you can get your best mileage in those map points that you're cruising down the road in. So really simple for the timing part of it. The next thing would be you start talking about fueling. So gasoline is a lot different than it was in the 70s. Okay. Gasoline, Stoic gasoline, no ethanol was 14.64 for a Stoic number. Okay. We'll call that Lambda 1. I'm not going to go too detailed in this to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So when your Lambda 1 was 14.64, that was what we were targeting for our cruise gas mileage. Now, years ago, we would take that, bump it up to like 15.2 on some of the trucks, trying to keep it leaner to pick up a little mileage. Now you can go too lean to where you get too much detonation, even at cruise. So you want to bring it up a little at a time until you see it. In the old fuel carbureted world, we had to take and modify the actual air bleeds to bring that up. And your jets had nothing to do with that. So it was just your air bleeds, which was a little complicated, but you could actually do that we would actually use speaker wire. Here's Carl the dyno, sorry. That's horsepower right there, right? So we would actually buy different size speaker wire to put in the air bleeds to change the emulsion. Now, that's a little complicated in the carburetor world, but in the fuel injection world, it's as simple as commanding the fuel that you want at cruise. And you can do that in the tables. It's already set up for you to do, and then you can modify it. Targets, I would say anywhere, our gas today, because of ethanol in most parts of the country, and I know heard something from other parts of the world, where they don't have ethanol, 14.64 is still the Stoic. If you have 10% ethanol, you're looking at 14.08 to 14.10 for your Stoic for 10. And 15% ethanol, you're looking around 13.86. All right. So if you've changed that number in your tune and you want to go leaner when you're cruising, you could actually command a leaner Stoic to do that, or you could do it in your Lambda table for your cruise. All right. So there's a couple different tables to do that. If you've never done it, and you're not up with it, get with your tuner, talk about it. If you have questions about it, definitely give me a call. I'll be glad to help you with it. That's my job. I get to help people make their cars better. So when you speak of that, so we talked about Spark Advance and the cruise and the vacuum pod from the carburetor deal. We talked about the vacuum or the cruise timing today with our fuel injection world, and we talked about the fueling. So those are the two major things. Now the next thing comes into play is super simple. People forget about it every day. I just did. I went on a trip and came back, and I was like, man, I'm like 2.5 miles to the gallon down. What's wrong with my car? And I tuned it, so I know everything is right on the tune. So I'm thinking, what's wrong? Simple thing. Kenny said it many times. Check your tire pressure. My tire pressure was down. 2.5 pounds of tire pressure was 2.5 miles to the gallon on my car. Now, if I drive a Focus RS, which gets 26 miles a gallon, it also makes 378 horsepower and 451 torque. So, but I keep my foot out of it when I'm cruising down the highway. And I normally cruise between 70 to 75. That's my best gas mileage in that car. But my tires were low. So I immediately went up. And of course, I went to our fleet of vehicles and went around every one of them and checked the tires. And they were all a little low in the middle of the summer. So, hey, my gas mileage comes up. If I pick up 1 to 2, I'm on top of it. So we talked about the spark. We talked about fuel. We talked about the air in the tire. The very next thing, I don't know in what part of the world you live in, but if you have AC and you're driving down the road and there's, you got your windows up, you're going to get your best gas mileage. Even with the windows down and no AC, it becomes a parasitic loss. We did the testing from St. Augustine to Daytona in a good part of the year. It was in Florida, but we did a good part of the year driving, and we tested with the windows down and the windows up, with the AC on and with the AC off. I got better mileage with the windows up and the AC on. So I know it sounds like, well, my AC is dropped, but it actually, the parasitic loss of the windows down, the aerodynamic loss was actually hurting our mileage. We lost roughly about 1.5, but that's still 1.5, and over a period of time, that'd be more. So that's one of the things we actually modified. So we kind of covered most of the bases on those. There's a couple little tricks. When you're using cruise control, your cruise control is a little more aggressive at times. So if you can drive the car plain out on the throttle and use less throttle to move it, sometimes you get better gas mileage. On the Fords, I can speak on the Fords because I don't know how GM exactly did it. On the Fords, Ford was very careful on the cruise control. There's actually a table that you can modify how aggressive the cruise control is in some of the vehicles, like the F-150s. So, if it's a real aggressive, then try just pedaling it and see at that point, and then get the cruise on the straightaways. And then pick your route. If you got to go somewhere where you got to go 45 mile an hour all the time, up and stop and at stoplights, your gas mileage is going to be worse normally. So pick your route. I like using Waze. I use it for my RV. I use it for our cars. Whenever we go somewhere, it normally tells me the quickest route where my most, and you can put in what vehicle you're driving, size of vehicle, truck, car, whatever else. And it gives you, even the height on some of them. So if any of you have an RV Parky is one of the apps we use for that as well. It gives you the best route for your mileage as well. You can check that.